Hey gang, we're going to go through and do the first stage of your first mobile app. We'll call it Windows Store app. Let's start out with Windows Store. We're going to select a blank app. I'm using .NET Framework 4.5. Now, you have to make sure that everything is up to date and everything's going to be using the same framework. If you haven't done so yet, you'll close down Windows Studio. You'll update to the latest SDK update. You'll actually have to go through, shut down the computer, do a reboot, and come back up again. Now, make sure that you've registered yourself to be able to actually develop using this toolkit. And once we've done that, everything should play nice with each other. Sometimes it doesn't. It's just a matter of going back through it again, making sure everything is updated and you're registered and you can actually develop using this SDK. We're using .NET Framework 4.5, and I've got Visual Studio 13 running on my machine here. So we'll start out, we'll choose a template, and the template we're going to use is going to be a JavaScript Windows Store, and we want to create a blank app. You see the language we've chosen is JavaScript. We'll call it Hello World. Make sure that we do not create a directory for the solution. We are not adding to source control. So both of these are not selected. So we'll call it Hello World, and we'll go ahead and we'll say OK, and we'll actually create it. So now it's going to give us all the basic components that we need for our solution. And a lot of this is stuff that we've already done. So here we go. We're up and running. It's pretty fast. Don't be surprised if it takes a second. Okay. Now, the first time that we go through and run our, we'll call this our basic shell of an app. All right. We see in here we've got a default style sheet. We've got some images built in. Default JavaScript that gave us a default HTML page. All right. We've got our Hello World temporary key, and here's our package itself. Now, manifest for the package. We'll get specific later. All right. If I go through and I run this, and I want to build it, it'll automatically build it, and it's hung up there for a second. It'll build it and deploy it. Now, the first time you deploy one of these, it may take a while. All right. So don't be surprised. Here, my build didn't take long. I'm deploying. It's creating a clean layout. So everything seems to be going fine at this point. Now it's registering the app to run from layout. You may get hung here. If you get hung here, 9 times out of 10, it has to do with you running the most up-to-date SDK. Okay? So, that being said, it may take a little while. So, notice it didn't fire up my app straight away. I'm still waiting. Now, we'll just sit and wait. And it may take a little bit. But usually the first time that we deploy one of these, it's going to take a little bit. Okay. Now, ultimately, we'll get a splash page that'll come up. There's our splash page. We'll deal with that later. We can pretty that up however we want it. And that's our default. And then our app or our content pops up. Now it says content goes here. Now I'm running Windows 8.1. I'll mouse up in the corner, throw me back to the desktop, and here I can go ahead and stop debugging and go ahead and shut down my app. Now, in this assignment, we've got a few things that we need to do over here. Now they show everything in black screen, and we see the Solution Explorer over here. Everything's the same. Okay. We've got our blank app. We've launched it. It's up and running. Now let's go through and modify our start page. Now scroll down in the directions, and I'm going to grab all this content here for the new and improved body of our page. Should be an all been there, done that for you. And we want to modify it from it saying content goes here to here's what we want it to look like. So come over, I'll open up this default page, and here we go. Here's our body. Control V, and I'll dump that code right in there. Let's go ahead and run it. And now it should look just like this image that we see in the directions. Splash page once again. And bam, here we go. We've got some content. Now, we've got content, we've got no function. I'll type it in. We've got no coding associated with this button. No event to actually get triggered, no functions. So we'll go ahead, we'll stop it. We're going to come back, we'll scroll down a bit, and we need to create an event handler. All right. Now, scroll down, and what I want is I want to create a button click handler. So I'm going to grab that code, come over to my JavaScript page. Now, there's on checkpoint. We're going to go after the app.onCheckpoint. Give us a little space, and we'll drop that button click handler in there. Right. Now, let's see. Let's add a little bit more in there. Okay. Let's add. Okay. We're going to add a listener. And what's happening is we've got a button, but the button doesn't do anything until we actually tell it to do something. So we need to have an event listener waiting for an event to actually occur. So we'll grab that code. I want to comment too. All right. And that'll go right here. And in our unactivated function. Okay. Let's go ahead and run it, see what we've got at this point. Now I've got a little bit more going on, so it took a little bit longer than the last go. Our splash page. And hello world. Come in here. H, say hello. Now we're taking that value from the text box. We've got our event handler associated with this button, and it's being concatenated and thrown it back as text. I'm going to mouse up, stop the debugging. Let's go look at it real quick. And here we go. When that button gets clicked, we've got our value, username. It's the input that we pull in. We're going to concatenate that value with a couple of string literal constants, and then we will display it using the document.getElementById output, and we're going to display that using a greeting string. Now, and we're displaying that as our greeting string. Sorry about that. We're pulling it here. That's greeting strings are variable. So at this point, we're pulling a value in, concatenating it into another string literal constant, dumping it in a variable, and throwing it back out on the page. So we've got some functionality here, and at this point, yeah, it works about like we see here. Let's go and we'll add some styles to it. All right. Currently, it should be dark. As go to our page, here it's dark. Let's change that to light, and we'll point to a different style. Go ahead and run it. Instead of having that dark background, we should end up with, and that's our splash page there. That's not our app. Bam, here's our app, and now we're no longer that black back screen. We've got the light back screen. Okay. Go ahead. Stop it. Let's move on to the next part. Okay. They want us to go create our own styles. You know, go play with it, but focus on getting the meat and potatoes of it done first. Make sure that it functions the way that it's assigned, and then once you get it doing what it's supposed to do, then you can go play with it. Okay? So at this point, let's go in, we'll take our body, and we're going to change the body, applying some styles to it now. So let's grab that body. Now we're calling the input, it's got an ID, our button's got an ID, this div has an ID, we've got classes now. Once we have IDs and classes, then we're going to come over here, we're going to grab some style sheet code and manipulate that header class, the main content class, and the greeting output ID. Okay. So, with that said, come over here. So open up that default CSS. We'll dump that style that they provided us right in there. And the style, if we look at it, all it is alignment. That's setting where the margins are. You'll see that it'll ultimately move us over a little bit. Okay. Now, let's save some time and not run that yet. One of the things they want us to do is we're going to go through and we're going to add a label and a rating control after our input text box and our button. Okay? So let's grab this new text or new content for our body. Control C. Come over here and we'll dump it right in here. And let's go look at it. Our classes are the same. We still have that. We've still got our input text box. We've still got our button. We still have our output. Now, we have a label. And the label says, rate this greeting. And then we've got a rating scale. That's something new for us. And it's going to look like this. So the user's actually going to interact with another portion of our app. It's not just a text box accepting some input and then regurgitating it back a little bit further down on the document. And it's actually going to take some input from them in a selection. And ultimately, we're going to provide, based on their selection, we'll give them a little number down here and say, oh, you selected number 2. Right? So let's say that we're Stephen. Say hello. Hello, Stephen. Rate this greeting. We rated a 2. Now you saw the 2 pops up above when I do that. And I don't have anything saved down below. Go ahead now. Stop debugging this. And we need to have some event handling take place when we're actually interacting with that control. Okay. Now, start out, we're going to have the output. Let's include that output. I want both. Let's see. No, I just want this part, just the one div. And that div will go right here. After our rating control, we'll have that rating output. And then I need to have a function that is triggered by this rating having changed. Okay? So let's grab that function. And that function, I come over to my JavaScript, it's going to be the last function in a line of functions. We'll dump it in. Rating has changed, event info. Rating output is a variable we're defining. It's getting whatever you've chosen and dumping it into that variable. Okay. Then it's going to end up throwing it back out there. Okay. Now, we need to have a listener associated with this. Just like we had a listener associated with the button. So, we've got, here's our button, the listener there. Let's grab all of that so that we're listening for the choice in the rating control as well as our button. Okay. Copy that. There we go. That's going to be in my set promise. There we go. Right in here. Control V. Right. So at that point, if I go ahead and run it, succeeded, nothing failed. There's our splash screen. We should have a white background. Our style sheet should be in play now. Yes, it is. It's shifted to the right a little bit. Let's test and see if this is still working. So, Rich, let's see if it works for you. Hey, Rich. We're going to rate this greeting. Let's give it 5 stars. There we go, 5. So we took that value from here, the value of the selection. We can do whatever we want to with it, but in this instance, we threw it back up here. Now, one of the things I like doing is testing on the page to find out if, in fact, the data is what I want it to be at any certain given time. So if I've got input from the user, I throw it back up and make sure that the input is being stored in that variable the way I think it is. It came in here, let me throw it back up and see that it is being stored where I think it is. Okay. So, go ahead and shut that down. And at this point, I believe we're all set. That's it. That's part 1. Okay, so for this first assignment, I want you to get into part 2. So we'll go ahead and I'll pause this one. I don't want the video getting too long. We'll take a break, stand up, stretch, walk around, whatever. And we'll come back to it on the next video. Okay?